Adams in us. We have the fallen Adam, which for this exhortation, I'll say, is the dragon. And then we have the second Adam, who is the Lord from heaven. Okay, he's the one that's being destroyed. The dragon is destroying the Lord from heaven. See, so each one of us has that dragon inside of us, and he sins in subtle ways, and that is the challenge, to understand that the thoughts of our mind are sin. Okay, and that, I could take hours on that. Thoughts that the average person would say, well, that's not sin. What are you talking about? Anything that's not of faith is sin. Mm-hmm. Faith is the thoughts of the Christ child, and everything else is sin. So the sin nature has both good and evil thoughts. So you can have a thought, the scripture says, well, the way of a man, it sounds good, but the end thereof is destruction. So many of our good thoughts are thoughts of the first Adam, who's our sin nature, who's trying to kill the second Adam, the Lord from heaven, that wants to raise us up as eternal, supernatural soldiers empowered by the Lord Jesus Christ, who will take out the Luciferian spirit in this world. So the church world is all talking about a rapture, okay? And the truth of the matter is that we're supposed to be in the process of being raised up as soldiers for Christ that are going to take this evil spirit out. And they're talking about flying away in some rapture somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think I answered your question.
So there's a lot there.
Yeah, that's what your dream is. I believe it's what's happening. Wow. It's happening in the spirit. Okay, in the natural, we have evil people stealing children and torturing them and cannibalizing them. But that dream is about God's church. When God gives us a dream, it's about His church. It's about His people. Okay, and they're being destroyed right now. Those roots, those spiritual roots that have the potential to be Samson's, to be David's, they're being destroyed before they're even born. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about.
and I'm sure there's going to be, a lot of people that listen to it. And I challenge you to, question what she's actually saying. There's, one of the things that bothers me is, and I saw this in like a picture or something on Instagram. I'm not even sure, like where it said something along the lines of, if you don't like church, like if you don't want to go to church and be in that environment, then why do you want to go to heaven? And so there's a lot of people that, obviously that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? That's very like off, like the top of the subject. Like it's not very deep or anything, but a lot of people have set up a system for themselves to either disconnect and have excuses why to live in sin and be okay with it, when in reality we should be questioning everything that we do. I've had moments where I tell myself, okay, I'm gonna fast, but instead of doing it from food, it doesn't work the same for me as it does for most people when it comes to food. What works for me is if I fast from the internet. Mm-hmm. The internet disconnects me from everything. Yeah. That's TV shows, movies, talking to people that I probably shouldn't be talking to. And then I kind of just resort to text messaging and talking to my parents and then the Bible. And I have found myself doing something so simple as just disconnecting and finding myself, the first time I did it, I found myself reconnecting. And so, that I challenge you to do something like that, give yourself a weekend where you don't touch the internet. Some of the things that are being shared in here, look that stuff up, look up her ministry. There's so many levels to this that, you're the majority of people are just touching the surface. And I welcome them, like I say, look, challenge everything.
Yeah. There's a saying that says a lie said many times becomes a true. And that's what's happening in the church system, religious system. They've been hearing the same thing for centuries because this generation passed it to the next one and to the next one and to the next one. And then when you hear something, what she's saying, Pastor Vitale tonight, then you said, wait a minute. Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
What? Wait a minute. Time out. What is she saying?
So there's two atoms? What's going on here?
It's life. I mean, it's like when you're eating the same hamburger every day, and then all of a sudden somebody said, "Hey, you want a T-bone steak?"
You get a stomachache. Yeah.
Oh, we're so happy that you're here, guys. Would you like to say something, Sandra?
I always have something to say. I think that it is really important to get connected to fellow believers because the influence is really important, and the what you absorb. I mean, in the business world, they say you're like 1/5 of the 5 people that that you hang around with most, or that influence you the most. And I think that's really important, and that you were having fellowship. And I really admire your family setting, that you guys have fellowship together and can meet each other on that line, on that level. And I just really admire that about you guys, and that you're digging into Pastor Sheila's messages, and that, just the fellowship has been wonderful, because this is like a hidden gem. This message is a hidden gem, and it really needs to be a beacon of hope, and people don't realize that it is a lifesaver. This message has changed my whole life, and it can take you out of despair, because right now the world is so they cover up the problems. They try to mask them. Everything is dealing with symptoms instead of getting to the root issue. And I believe that this ministry gets to the root issues.
Amen.
I mean, nothing gets past the Lord.
Amen.
When it's His timing. So that's what I really appreciate about the ministry, and it's done in freedom, and we're continually growing. The Spirit is fluid and it's moving, and we're moving in the Spirit, and He's teaching us. We heard that this deep doctrine that Pastor Sheila is preaching here, but she deals with, it's like this whole array of the ministry. It's like this wholeness aspect of who we are, dealing with the little things in our sin nature that needs to be dealt with. But at the same time, she's feeding us this delicious, deep doctrine. So when all that comes together, that equals the building up of Christ in us, the hope of glory.
Yeah.
So
Something that I see in Pastor Sheila is that we all, I don't know, we speak words, but when you hear her, she speaks seeds. I mean,
amen.
It's not words, it's seeds, because every word is like, oh, wait a minute. And then you think you understood that one, and then there comes the next one. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Because it's life. I mean, it's like the seed of other things and the foundation for other things. So building blocks, I can call it building blocks.
And I connect with that because as a musical artist, one of the most beautiful things to me is when somebody, 6-7 years later, they're like, hey, you remember this song that you wrote? And I'm like, uh-huh. When you said this and this here, did you mean this? Yeah. Wow. I didn't even catch that the first time around. And I'm like, I'm glad that you heard that, because I that's, to me, it's a beautiful thing to write in general. And so I like to put little seeds here and there in my lyrics and stuff, that sometimes I even sit down with my mom when I write a brand new song, and then I'll like decipher it for her, and she's like, how did you, like, how? And then I'm like, it's just fun to play with words like that, on a musical level. But so to me, to sit down and hear, some of the stuff that you say I have heard, because of me, we get really deep in conversations here. That's the whole point of the podcast. I'm babying them right now. But, I like I said earlier in the podcast, I think that this is going to be something where a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, and I feel like you have to be, there's so many levels that you have no excuse but to get deep into it. Everything else is just a distraction.
Yes. Exactly.
Also, what is very helpful? It helped my first encounter with the alternate translation. You see, sometimes long years ago back, I read the Bible and I get frustrated because I was getting some contradictions, and
supposedly,
and
it's because of translations.
Because if you read the Bible, it's something, and to study is something else. Two different experience. But I was reading the Bible and I found out many contradictions, and it's not because I'm looking for that. I used to have like 6 or 7 Bibles and matched them, and I found out, translation problems, and but my personal experience was I started reading your pamphlets,
Yes.
or books about the alternate translation, and it was a different language, and I said, "Wait a minute!" But
It took me more than 3 months.
Yeah, I kept insisting, and of course asking the Lord, what is this? And I said, if this is yours, it's coming from you, you have to, let me see it. But one time I was studying the chapter 6 of Romans,
Yes.
7 and 8. And I found out that chapter 6 speak about the condition. Okay? And then I found out that chapter 7 is the status that you are right now. And then I said, Lord, now what?
Number 8.
Now that I see this, he said, keep going. You'll see the way out. And when I studied Romans 8, I said, oh my God, here's the solution. So you see, I was taught since I was very small at the beginning about this thing about the nature.
Yes.
And then when I heard you speaking about, the fallen nature,
Yes.
the sin nature, and I said, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be redeemed. What's going on? Why is she saying, stressing a lot? I used to say to Maria, you know what? Everything I read is sin nature. When she's gonna write something about the mind of Christ or God nature, because that's what I need. The solution. I don't want to be, I know that, and
Now you have to go to CCK.
Exactly. But, you keep studying and the Lord, revealed to you more and more, because it's not right to stress about the sin nature. I need the solution. Exactly. And then when I finally, because my living style, the way I was living, I said, wait a minute. But they teach me that when he went to the cross, the nature of God is in me. How can sin nature be there? And then that's when the war started.
Yes.
And then when I study about the mind of Christ and the carnal mind, I said, okay, now this is what we need to have these two mindset.
Yes.
But we know that the mind of Christ is powerful, and the carnal mind, the more we study about the carnal mind, we notice that already the mind of Christ, or what he did in the cross, already conquered that. But I need to go through that experience and acknowledge that I personally need to do it.
Yes.
Because the problem is in the soulish realm, not in my spiritual level. So the more you get into it, you realize, wait a minute, this is real food, for your spirit. Because it's like in a marriage, if the female part is the one taking the pulpit and preaching and doing different things, hello, what about the spirit, And I started understanding all these things, and I said, and the thing is that there's a lot of confusion out there in the, Christian arena. It's because when we read the Bible or study the Bible, there's, if you don't have this mindset, it's easily to go astray, because it happened to me. And this is what I pray, Lord, I want to see the truth,
Mm.
you know, and this is very important. And for the people out there, I've been long time serving the Lord, and every day I get up, I learn something new, and I've been like 42 years in this thing, and every time.
Then you realize you've been
Yeah.
for too long in kindergarten.
Every time the Lord reveals something, I found out myself in elementary school, spiritually speaking, of course. But that's good because the more you think you know,
The less you know.
the less you know, and the lowest you have to go and be humble.
Be
But it's amazing how I study some of your pamphlets. At the beginning, it drove me crazy, but then I found out the stream, and and
once
it's
you-
awesome.
Once you hit the vein, boom, you're done. Before we finish, there are 3 things that I wanted you to do. They're very short, but very important for me. I would like for you at the end to do a prayer for the people that are listening, and in the spirit to outreach them and claim for them to be awakened and the spirit, the mind of Christ be awakened, because we're in the virgins. They all fell asleep, and that's what we're going through in humanity. But so at the end, I'd like you to pray, and then before you pray, I'd like you to give out your ministry website, so people can, if they want to know more about the teaching of Christ and everything, that the little bit that you have shared tonight, they can go into the website.
But we will also include that information on.
Oh, we're gonna
the
do it on the
description.
website too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. And but she's gonna say it out loud so you can copy
Yeah,
it. But there's one last question. I don't know how long it's going to take for the answer, but in a nutshell at least, because this is something that people, I don't know, I asked this question many times, and you wrote a book, The Chronicles of Noah, which is really revolutionized my life, because I share with him, I read it completely through, and then I started again, and then I would like to, that's next book, if you allow me to, give me the honor to translate it for the ministry, because I think it's going to be a blessing for the Spanish community. But can you,
What's the title?
the Noah's Chronicles. Yeah, I have it right there. And you said something there that really, man, gave me one of the missing links that I needed in my life for my growth, for my spiritual growth, and understanding what's going on in the spirit. But you mentioned something, and you said the reason why evil was not completely eradicated, because see, the flood was supposed to take away and wash away everything and
Right.
start afresh, a new life, because Noah was supposed to do something that he didn't do. And then can you just a little bit about that? Why if we didn't, because Jesus make reference of that. He said, like in the days of Noah. Why he goes back? Why when the Messiah, the Son of God that finally came to earth 2,000 years ago, had to go back into reference to what happened in the day of the flood? Because I believe that there's a very important key there that has to do with the time that we're living today and why we're going through that again after the flood. Why a flood? And then we continue on the other side.
Well, what happened was the scripture says that everything in the earth was destroyed, but everything that was in the sea was not destroyed. So what that means, first of all, I've done a second edition of that book.
Oh, yes. Send me the second edition.
Yeah. It's not finished yet. It's almost finished yet.
Okay.
What had happened, you see, a lot of Christians think that the big sin is homosexuality. Homosexuality and transgenderism, it's a great abomination before the Lord, but that is just a symptom. That is not the sin. That is a symptom of the changing of the spirit of Jesus Christ to the Luciferian spirit. It doesn't just happen in the heavenlies, it's actually happening inside of the people, okay? And it's the corruption of the flesh. You can read more about it in the book of Enoch. You should really be grounded in the scripture if you're going to read the book of Enoch. But the book of Enoch, there are several books of Enoch, I think 3 books of Enoch talk about it. The reason for the flood was that these evil forces completely corrupted the flesh. I don't know if it was humanity on the other side or not, but you can see what's happening today. They're making men women, women men. They're completely corrupting the creation to the point that if the Lord doesn't stop it, there will be no humans left for him to dwell in. That's the whole point. They want to so corrupt the flesh that there's no flesh for Jesus to dwell in. And then that will be the cutting off of God in the earth. And they think they'll take over the whole earth. But that will never happen. If it should happen, we would be Sodom and Gomorrah. But I don't think the Lord's going to let it happen. They cannot steal God's creation and continue to exist. But that's the goal.